Joan of Arc is often seen as a saint and a warrior, but her story is filled with twists and turns that might surprise you. What if I told you that her life was not just about battles and bravery? In fact, there are hidden layers to her journey that many don't know. Today, we're going to explore her humble beginnings, and you might find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about this iconic figure, or shaped Joan into the legend she became. To start, let's transport ourselves back to a small village in France, Domrémy. This was not a place of nobility or power. It was a quaint peasant community where life was simple but steeped in strong religious beliefs. Can you imagine the impact of such an upbringing on a child's mind? In a world filled with divine stories, young Joan grew up surrounded by tales of saints and the power of faith. Born in 1412, Joan was the daughter of Jacques, a farmer, and his wife Isabelle. From an early age, she was exposed to the struggles and hardships of peasant life. It was a time of turmoil, with the 100 Years' War raging between England and France. But amidst this chaos, Joan's family remained devoutly religious. Every Sunday they attended Mass, and prayers were a regular part of their lives. This environment undoubtedly planted the seeds of faith and purpose in Joan's heart. Now picture this: a young girl, perhaps around 12 years old, hears voices. Not the kind of voices we might expect, but ones that claim to be from angels and saints. Imagine the confusion and fear that would come with such an experience. Most people would dismiss it as mere imagination, but Joan believed in the divine messages she received. This mysterious connection began early in her life and would ultimately shape her destiny in ways no one could foresee. It's fascinating to consider how these early experiences would influence her future. As she listened to the voices, they called her to a grand mission: to support Charles VII, the Dauphin of France, and to drive the English out of her homeland. This was no small task for a peasant girl, but what motivated her? Was it her strong religious upbringing, the desperation of her people, or perhaps a deep-seated desire for adventure? Truth is, it was likely a combination of all these factors, woven together by the threads of her faith. Here's a strange fact. At one point, Joan was told to wear male clothing and cut her hair short to present herself as a man. This was revolutionary for a woman of her time. You might find it humorous or shocking that she embraced this transformation without hesitation, defying gender norms. Now, Joan didn't just embrace the role of a warrior. She transformed into one, challenging societal expectations at every turn. As she matured, her conviction grew stronger. Joan became a beacon of hope for the French people, who were desperate for a hero. They saw her not just as a girl, but as a symbol of divine intervention. However, her path was riddled with obstacles, skepticism, and even outright hostility. Many viewed her as a threat, a girl playing at being a leader in a man's world. The conflict between her divine mission and societal norms added to the tension surrounding her life. You might be wondering how a peasant girl could rise to such prominence. Well, her charisma and unwavering faith were compelling. She gained a reputation for her passionate speeches and her ability to inspire those around her. Joan's confidence was infectious. She spoke of visions with such conviction that even the most doubtful soldiers began to believe. But what does it take to rally people for a common cause? It's about more than just words. It's about truly believing in the mission you advocate for. Yet as she gained followers, she also attracted enemies. The question remains, how did Joan navigate this treacherous landscape? The reality is that while she was a hero to many, she was also seen as a pawn in a much larger game of political chess. The powerful figures surrounding Charles VII had their own agendas, and Joan was caught in the crossfire. Her humble beginnings became a double-edged sword. While they earned her the sympathy of the masses, they also made her vulnerable to manipulation by those who sought to use her for their gain. As we delve deeper into her story, consider this: what happens when someone who believes they are chosen by God is thrust into a world of politics, power struggles, and betrayal? The stakes were high, and Joan was about to discover just how perilous her path could be. With each victory, the expectations grew, and the pressure mounted. Joan's journey from a peasant girl to a national icon is not just a tale of bravery. It's a reflection of the struggles that define human experience. It raises questions about identity, faith, and the true meaning of leadership. As we uncover the layers of her life, remember this: Joan of Arc is not merely a character from history. She is a reminder that greatness can emerge from the most unlikely of beginnings. Through Joan's eyes, we begin to understand the power of conviction, the struggle against adversity, and the indomitable spirit of a young woman who dared to dream. Move forward, keep these themes in mind. Each section will peel back another layer of her extraordinary life, revealing insights that might challenge your perceptions. In this exploration of Joan of Arc's early life, you've begun to see how her humble beginnings shaped her into the legend she would become. The experiences of her youth, coupled with her strong religious beliefs, laid the foundation for her incredible journey. What do you think these voices told her? Joan of Arc, a name synonymous with bravery and faith, claimed to hear voices from saints like Michael, Catherine, and Margaret. These were not just whispers in her mind. They were urgent calls that set her on a path few could have imagined. At a time when France was in turmoil, these divine messages urged her to support Charles VII and reclaim her homeland from English occupation. But how does a young peasant girl, barely a teenager, convince others that she is on a mission from God? The moment Joan began to hear these voices, it marked a significant turning point in her life. Imagine living in a small village in the early 15th century, where the daily grind involved tending to crops and livestock, far removed from the grandeur of courts and kings. Most people would dismiss such claims as the fanciful tales of a young girl. However, Joan embraced these divine messages as her reality. This belief in her spiritual calling would not only transform her life, but would also alter the course of French history. At the heart of her story lies a profound insight, the power of conviction. Joan's experience resonates deeply with anyone who has ever felt a calling or a purpose. You might ask, what compels someone to trust in something so ethereal? For Joan, the voices she heard weren't just random thoughts. They were imbued with the weight of divine authority. This conviction set her apart and led her to a destiny she could hardly have envisioned. Initially, Joan's journey began with a simple yet profound task: to convince her family and local leaders of her divine mission. She boldly approached the local garrison commander, Robert de Baudricourt, insisting that she could help lift the Siege of Orléans and bring the Dauphin to his rightful place as king. Can you imagine the skepticism she faced? A peasant girl challenging men of war in politics. It's almost laughable to picture her standing in front of seasoned soldiers, proclaiming that she had a message from God. But this audacity is what set the stage for her remarkable journey. As we delve deeper, consider this. Many people today grapple with the idea of believing in something larger than themselves. Joan's unwavering faith in her divine messages resonates with this modern struggle. Her early experiences and willingness to embrace the seemingly impossible reflect a broader truth. The power of belief can inspire action, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Here's a strange fact. Joan insisted on wearing men's clothing, not just for practicality, but also to symbolize her role as a warrior. This was shocking for a woman of her time. It's amusing to think that dressing like a man could make such a significant difference in her life. It raises an interesting question. What lengths would you go to in order to fulfill your destiny? Joan challenged societal norms at a time when women were expected to be submissive and silent. The voices guided her not just to battle, but to make a difference in a war that was tearing her country apart. As she began to assemble a following, people were drawn to her. They were inspired by her determination and the conviction she exuded. Her confidence and fierce belief in her mission were contagious. It's almost ironic that a peasant girl, often overlooked by society, would become a beacon of hope for an entire nation. However, this journey was fraught with skepticism. Many questioned her motivations and the legitimacy of her claims. Some labeled her a heretic, while others viewed her as a pawn in a larger game. Can you believe that a young girl's claim of divine inspiration could incite fear and distrust among the very people she aimed to help? This perception would shape her narrative and the challenges she faced as she moved forward. What did it take for her to convince the Dauphin, Charles VII, of her divine mission? This moment is pivotal. Despite the doubts swirling around her, Joan pressed on, determined to meet the future king. You might think it was her bravery alone that won him over, but it was much more complex than that. It was her ability to articulate her visions and the hope she brought to a desperate situation that captured his attention. This was just the beginning of many bold moves. Joan's audacity to approach Charles VII would set the stage for a series of events that would not only change her life, but also alter the course of French history. The young girl who once heard voices in a quiet village would soon be leading men into battle, but not without first overcoming the societal expectations that threatened to bind her. In this exploration of the voices that inspired Joan of Arc, we see a remarkable tale of faith and resilience. She transformed from a simple peasant girl into a national symbol of hope and courage, guided by what she believed to be divine messages. It prompts us to consider the complexities of belief, identity, and the courage to pursue one's calling, no matter how impossible it may seem. So, as we continue our journey into the life of Joan of Arc, remember this: the power of conviction and the strength derived from faith can lead to extraordinary outcomes. Joan's story is a testament to the idea that when one believes wholeheartedly in a mission, they can inspire others to rally behind them. What lies ahead in her story? How will she navigate the challenges that come her way? Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the remarkable life of this extraordinary figure. Can you imagine the excitement of leading an army? Joan of Arc, a young girl from humble beginnings, was about to experience that thrill firsthand. When she was given armor and a banner to lead troops, it marked a significant moment not just for her but for the entire French army. Her rise to power is not only a tale of military conquest, but also one of extraordinary leadership and the ability to inspire those around her. As Joan donned her armor, she transformed from a peasant girl into a symbol of hope and courage. But what does it take to lead an army, especially during a time of war? Joan's passion and conviction were infectious. Imagine being one of those soldiers, weary from the endless fighting, and seeing a young woman approach with determination etched on her face. Her very presence could ignite a spark of hope in the most despondent hearts. Joan's strategy was not just about leading troops into battle, it was about fostering morale. She understood that to rally people for a common cause, they needed to believe in that cause. This belief was cultivated through her genuine enthusiasm and unwavering faith. As she inspired her troops, they began to see her not just as a leader, but as a divine force sent to guide them. Can you think of a time when someone's passion inspired you? Joan had that ability, multiplied by the divine messages she claimed to receive. One strange fact about Joan is that she insisted on leading her troops without fear. In a time when women were expected to be meek and obedient, her bravery was revolutionary. It is both humorous ludicrous and shocking to consider how a peasant girl, claiming to hear divine voices, could walk into a military camp and command respect. Yet that's exactly what she did, and it worked. Her unique position allowed her to shatter preconceived notions about gender roles. As she gathered her troops, Joan also implemented various strategies to boost morale. She emphasized the righteousness of their cause, fighting for France, their homes, and their families. Joan would often lead her men in prayer before battles, reinforcing their shared belief in their mission. The power of collective faith cannot be underestimated. When a group believes in a cause, they become more than just a collection of individuals. They become a united force. What does it take to rally people for a common cause? Joan understood that empathy and connection were vital. She shared personal stories of her visions, recounting how they led her to this very moment. These narratives fostered a sense of intimacy and urgency among her troops. Soldiers who had once doubted her began to view her as a prophet, believing that they were part of something greater than themselves. This shift in perspective was essential as they faced the horrors of battle. As we delve deeper into her story, it's crucial to recognize the challenges Joan faced as a young woman in a man's world. Her rise to power came with immense scrutiny. Many questioned her abilities, doubting that a girl could lead seasoned soldiers. But Joan's confidence often silenced her critics. She was acutely aware of the perceptions surrounding her, yet she didn't allow them to deter her mission. It's remarkable to consider how she broke through these barriers, not just for herself but for future generations of women who would aspire to lead. Joan's confidence was contagious, and as she led her troops, she began to form strategies for their battles. Unlike many commanders of her time, she emphasized the importance of morale over tactic. While seasoned generals often focused on formations and weaponry, Joan brought a fresh perspective, reminding her soldiers of the importance of faith and unity. This innovative approach marked a departure from traditional military strategies and helped her troops regain hope. Here's a little-known fact. Joan believed that she was guided by divine intervention, not only in her visions, but also in her battle strategies. She would often claim that her intuition led her to key decisions during battles, leading her to target specific enemies or choose advantageous positions. This reliance on her instincts set her apart from other commanders, making her a unique figure on the battlefield. Imagine the battlefield, dust swirling, soldiers shouting, and the weight of armor heavy on your shoulders. In such chaos, Joan's ability to remain calm and focused was critical. Her leadership style included direct engagement with her soldiers, often moving among them, offering encouragement and reminding them of their shared purpose. This connection helped to humanize her, reinforcing the bond between leader and follower. As battles ensued, Joan's reputation as a fierce leader grew. Soldiers began to speak of her with reverence. They would follow her into battle with a sense of loyalty and belief that was nearly fanatical. But what happens when a leader becomes larger than life? The line between admiration and obsession can blur, and Joan was no exception. This intense loyalty, while powerful, also placed immense pressure on her. The expectations for her to succeed mounted with each victory, creating a double-edged sword that would ultimately impact her fate. Battles were fierce, and losses were inevitable. Joan experienced the pain of losing men she had come to care for deeply. The emotional toll weighed heavily on her, yet she remained resolute. Each victory reinforced her belief that she was chosen for a higher purpose. But this unwavering faith also set the stage for intense scrutiny. Each defeat would prompt critics to question her divine mission. As Joan's legend grew, so did the stakes. She was no longer just a leader. She was a symbol of French nationalism and resistance against the English. The pressure to deliver on her promises became overwhelming, and she had to navigate not only the battlefield, but also the court's political intrigues. How does a young woman maintain her identity and integrity amidst such challenges? Joan's story illustrates the profound complexities of leadership, especially when the weight of a nation's hopes rests on your shoulders. In summary, Joan's rise to power was marked by her incredible ability to inspire and lead. She transformed from a simple peasant girl into a formidable military leader, rallying troops with her faith and conviction. Her journey teaches us valuable lessons about the nature of leadership, the importance of connection, and the complexities of belief. As we move forward in her story, we will explore how her leadership would culminate in critical battles and shape the future of France. What lies ahead for Joan as she steps into the role of a national symbol? Stay tuned as the saga of her extraordinary life continues to unfold. What was the significance of the Siege of Orléans? This battle was a pivotal moment in the 100 Years' War, marking a turning point not just for Joan of Arc but for the entire French nation. In 1429, the English had tightened their grip on France, and Orléans was one of their most critical strongholds. The city was under siege, and hope was dwindling for the French forces. Could a young girl lead them to victory against such overwhelming odds? Joan's arrival at Orléans was filled with a mix of skepticism and excitement. Many had heard tales of the peasant girl who claimed to hear divine voices. Some were doubtful. After all, what could a young woman really achieve against seasoned soldiers? Yet her presence alone brought a spark of hope to the beleaguered citizens and soldiers alike. Imagine the atmosphere in Orléans, a city under siege, with its people anxious and frightened. The air was thick with tension, but then came Joan, a beacon of resilience. She immediately engaged with the local commanders and encouraged them to act. But how did she manage to galvanize them? Joan didn't just talk about military strategy. She infused her speeches with fervor and conviction, emphasizing their rightful cause, the liberation of France. This approach was both refreshing and revolutionary. In a world where military leaders were often distant and detached, Joan's passionate presence was magnetic. Now, here's a strange fact that might surprise you. Joan insisted on leading her troops into battle without hesitation, claiming that her divine visions instructed her to do so. While most military leaders stayed behind the lines, she was right there, on the front lines, fighting alongside her men. This was not just audacity, it was a demonstration of her unwavering belief in her mission. Can you imagine the morale boost her presence provided to those fighting alongside her? As the siege progressed, Joan's tactical brilliance began to shine through. She understood the significance of attacking when the enemy least expected it. Under her leadership, the French forces launched a series of surprise assaults that caught the English off guard. Joan's ability to read the battlefield was impressive. She often pointed out weak spots in the English lines and directed her troops accordingly. It was this intuition, combined with her fierce determination, that turned the tide. But let's pause for a moment. Most people think that warfare is solely about strategy and weaponry, but the reality is that morale can be just as critical. Joan's leadership created a profound sense of unity among the French forces. Soldiers who were once hesitant now felt emboldened to fight. They believed they were part of something greater, a divine mission to reclaim their homeland. This collective spirit was instrumental in their victories. The Siege of Orléans also served as a powerful symbol for the French people. The significance of this battle extended beyond the immediate military gains. It became a rallying cry for those who longed for freedom from English domination. The outcome of the siege would not only affect the course of the war, but would also redefine national identity for the French people. Joan's role in this battle positioned her as a national hero, a figure of hope in a time of despair. Now let's talk about the far-reaching repercussions of this battle. The victory at Orléans not only lifted the siege, but also sparked a wave of enthusiasm across France. Towns and cities that had previously succumbed to English control began to rise up. Joan's success encouraged others to join the fight, and suddenly, the French forces were rejuvenated. This momentum proved critical in shifting the dynamics of the war. What many don't realize is that Joan's victory at Orléans was not just a military triumph. It was also a psychological victory. The French people, who had lived in fear and uncertainty, suddenly felt empowered. The idea that a single individual could change the course of their fate was exhilarating. This narrative became central to Joan's legacy, illustrating how one person's conviction can inspire a nation. However, the aftermath of the siege also posed challenges for Joan. While she had proven her mettle as a leader, the expectations placed upon her grew exponentially. The question lingered: could she maintain this momentum? What would happen when the reality of war clashed with the high hopes of the people? Joan's journey was about to take a complicated turn, filled with both triumphs and trials. As we delve deeper into the life of Joan of Arc, remember this pivotal moment at the Siege of Orléans. It encapsulates her courage, determination, and ability to inspire others in the face of overwhelming odds. This battle marked the beginning of her ascent as a national icon and a formidable leader. But what would this newfound power bring? The next chapters of her story will reveal the complexities of leadership in wartime and the heavy burden of expectation that comes with it. Stay tuned as the journey of Joan of Arc unfolds, full of twists and turns that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Why was this moment crucial for Joan and France? The coronation of Charles VII in Reims in July 1429 marked a significant turning point not only for Joan of Arc but also for the future of France itself. After leading a miraculous victory at the Siege of Orléans, Joan's efforts culminated in this historic event, fulfilling her divine mission to see Charles crowned as king. But what does this crowning truly signify, and why is it such a momentous occasion? Imagine the scene in Reims, a city filled with anticipation and hope, as the people gathered to witness a transformative moment in their nation's history. The air was electric with emotion. After years of war and despair, the prospect of a legitimate king reinstated a sense of national pride among the French. Joan's role in this event was pivotal. She wasn't just a spectator, she was the catalyst that ignited this historical change. While most people think a coronation is merely a ceremonial affair, the reality is much deeper. This moment was a powerful symbol of unity and resilience for the French people. Joan's presence at the coronation reinforced the idea that divine intervention had played a role in their struggles. It was as if she were a living embodiment of hope, reminding the citizens that their prayers had been answered. The very act of crowning Charles VII represented a turning point in the war, signifying that France was not defeated, but rather poised for resurgence. In the lead-up to the coronation, Joan prepared Charles and his entourage, instilling in them the confidence to embrace their rightful roles. What many may not realize is that this was a highly political maneuver, fraught with risk. Charles VII, previously seen as an illegitimate heir, was about to claim his right to the throne publicly, and Joan was the one leading the charge. This boldness would not come without challenges. Joan knew that the legitimacy of this crowning could rally the people, but could also backfire if met with opposition. Here's a curious fact. Joan insisted on wearing her battle armor for the coronation. This choice was not merely practical. It symbolized her commitment to her mission and the fight that lay ahead. It also challenged the expectations of women in her time, serving as a powerful statement of defiance against traditional gender roles. Imagine the impact of a woman in armor standing beside the king during such an important ceremony. This was a powerful image that would resonate throughout history. As the moment of the coronation approached, the atmosphere became charged with anticipation. anticipation. The people of France, exhausted from years of conflict, looked to Joan and Charles as symbols of hope. This was not just a personal victory for them. It was a collective triumph for a nation yearning for stability and peace. The crowning ceremony itself was filled with tradition, including the anointing of the king with holy oil, a ritual steeped in history and significance. But what challenges awaited after this triumph? The reality of their situation began to dawn on them. Even with the crown on his head, Charles VII faced immense political and military challenges. Joan had successfully orchestrated a spectacular victory, but sustaining that momentum required more than just ceremonial glory. The newly crowned king still had to win the loyalty of his nobles and confront the English forces that had not been fully vanquished. The crown symbolized more than just power. It represented the hope of a united France. However, this unity was fragile. Joan's influence over the king and the court was significant, but it also painted a target on her back. With each victory, the expectations grew and the scrutiny intensified. Critics within the court and among the nobility began to question her role and her motives, fearing that her influence could overshadow the traditional power dynamics. As we reflect on this moment, it's essential to recognize the complexities involved in Joan's journey. She was not merely a warrior, she was a catalyst for change in a time of uncertainty. Her presence at the coronation served as a bridge between divine will and political reality, bringing hope to a fractured nation. It's fascinating to consider how a single person can inspire a collective movement, especially in a world that often overlooks the contributions of women. The repercussions of this coronation were far-reaching. Joan's influence would lead to further military campaigns and an attempt to solidify Charles's rule across France. Yet this would not be the end of her struggles. The very moment that catapulted her into national prominence also set the stage for the challenges that would come. What happens when the expectations of a nation rest on the shoulders of one person? Joan's journey illustrates the delicate balance of hope and pressure, showcasing how quickly fortunes can change. As we delve deeper into Joan's life, we see that her story is one of incredible bravery, but it's also about the burdens that come with leadership. The coronation was a moment of triumph, but it was also a precursor to the trials that lay ahead. Joan's unwavering faith and conviction were about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. In summary, the coronation of Charles VII in Reims was not just a ceremonial act, it was a significant turning point for France, symbolizing hope and unity in a time of despair. Joan's role in this moment cannot be overstated. She was the spark that ignited a movement, embodying the dreams and aspirations of a nation. As we continue to explore her life, keep in mind the weight of expectation and the challenges that come with leadership. What other obstacles would Joan face as she navigated the complexities of her newfound power? Stay tuned as her journey unfolds, revealing both the glories and the pitfalls of her extraordinary life. What changed for Joan after the coronation? The crowning of Charles VII was a monumental achievement for Joan of Arc, yet it also marked the beginning of a new chapter filled with increasing political tensions and skepticism. While her mission seemed accomplished, the reality of the political landscape began to shift dramatically. Joan was about to discover that being a hero could also mean facing the harshest of realities. The moment the crown was placed on Charles's head, it signified more than just a victory for Joan. It was a beacon of hope for a war-weary nation. The French court was rife with intrigues and rivalries, and Joan soon found herself caught in the middle of them. It's fascinating to consider how one moment of triumph could usher in an era of doubt and scrutiny. Most people think that victory guarantees stability, but the reality is that it often breeds contention. Joan had proven her mettle as a leader, yet many nobles resented a peasant girl holding so much influence. With her rise to prominence came a wave of jealousy and skepticism, particularly from those who had long held power. What happens when a once heroic figure becomes a target for political maneuvering? Joan's journey was about to reveal just how precarious her position had become. One strange fact that may surprise you is that Joan's influence was so powerful that she was considered a threat by some of the established nobility. They viewed her as an outsider, someone who had risen from humble beginnings to challenge the status quo. This was both a testament to her leadership and a harbinger of the conflicts to come. As Joan's credibility faced challenges, she would have to navigate a landscape filled with alliances that shifted like quicksand. With the coronation behind them, Joan and Charles set their sights on reclaiming more territories from the English. Yet each campaign revealed the fractures within their ranks. Joan was not just leading troops, she was also expected to mediate disputes between various factions. How do you keep a group united when trust is waning? Joan had to confront not only external enemies but also internal dissent. As she engaged with the military leaders, Joan found herself facing increasing skepticism. Many wondered whether her divine visions could really guide them in battle. Some high-ranking officials believed that her influence over Charles was misguided, while others questioned her military strategy. The very people who once rallied behind her were now hesitant, unsure of the young woman's abilities to lead them to further victories. This tension came to a head during the campaign to take Paris. Joan's ambitious plan to seize the city quickly turned into a contentious debate among the military leaders. The cautious voices began to rise, advocating for a more conservative approach, fearing that another bold move could lead to disaster. In contrast, Joan remained firm, believing that decisive action was necessary to maintain momentum. This clash of philosophies would set the stage for a critical critical moment in her life. Imagine being in Joan's position, rallying troops, preparing for battle, and dealing with doubts from those you once inspired. The pressure was immense. While she believed wholeheartedly in her mission, she was beginning to realize that not everyone shared her fervor. The stakes were higher than ever. Failure could mean not only a loss in battle, but also a loss of faith in her leadership. As the campaigns progressed, Joan's resolve was tested like never before. She faced setbacks that would shake the confidence of even the most seasoned leaders. The struggle for Paris ended in failure, and with it, whispers of doubt grew louder. Was Joan's guidance truly divinely inspired, or was it merely the bravado of a young girl who had gone too far? The battle for her credibility was now just as critical as any battle fought on the field. Here's a controversial point to ponder. Some historians argue that Joan's unwavering faith in her divine mission blinded her to the reality of the political games at play. While her passion and commitment were admirable, they may have also contributed to her downfall. In a world governed by power struggles, could a pure heart lead to failure? This question lingers as we explore how her steadfast beliefs began to clash with the brutal nature of warfare and politics. Despite the growing doubts, Joan's spirit remained unyielding. She continued to preach the importance of their cause, often invoking the divine messages she believed she received. However, as military setbacks mounted, her connection to these voices began to falter in the eyes of those around her. Could she hold on to the faith that had driven her this far, or would the weight of skepticism shatter her resolve? What happens when faith meets reality? Joan's experiences during this turbulent period illustrate the complex interplay between belief and the harsh truths of war. The once unstoppable force was now facing her greatest challenge, not just from her enemies, but from within her ranks. The turning point for Joan was not just about battles. It was about the resilience of her spirit in the face of adversity. As Joan's influence began to wane, it became clear that she would need to reassess her strategies, not only on the battlefield, but also in how she engaged with her allies. The very leaders who had once supported her now seemed to waver in their confidence. This uncertainty would follow her like a shadow, complicating her efforts to unify the troops and pursue their mission. In summary, the period following the coronation of Charles VII was filled with complexities that tested Joan of Arc's resolve. She transformed from a celebrated hero to a figure grappling with doubt and skepticism. The political tensions and challenges she faced illustrated the precariousness of leadership, especially when a nation's hopes rested on her shoulders. As we delve further into her story, the stakes will only continue to rise, revealing the depths of Joan's courage and the challenges she must overcome in her quest for France's liberation. How would her journey unfold as she navigated this turbulent landscape? Stay tuned, as the next chapters of her life promise to be both enlightening and dramatic. How did Joan end up in the hands of her enemies? The dramatic capture of Joan of Arc at Compiègne in 1430 marked a pivotal and heartbreaking turn in her life. For a woman who had once stood resolutely in the face of armies, this moment brought an unexpected shift from heroism to betrayal. As she and her troops engaged in battle, Joan was leading a fierce charge against the Burgundians, who were allies of the English. The situation quickly turned chaotic, and in the confusion, Joan found herself isolated from her comrades. Imagine the feeling of panic as the tides of war turned against her, with soldiers retreating and the sounds of battle drowning out any chance of regrouping. This is where her story takes a dark and uncertain turn. Most people think that a hero can always triumph, but the reality is that even the most valiant can find themselves ensnared by fate. Joan was captured through a combination of her boldness and the unpredictable nature of war. Ironically, her unwavering courage, which had propelled her to extraordinary heights, would ultimately lead her to an equally dramatic fall. Here's a strange fact that might surprise you. Joan was captured by forces she had once fought alongside. The Burgundians, who had their own motivations and grievances against the French crown, seized the opportunity to take her prisoner, recognizing her as both a valuable hostage and a significant political bargaining chip. What would it feel like to be betrayed by those who once shared your cause? The betrayal was a crushing blow, shaking her faith in her allies and the very mission she had dedicated her life to. Imagine the turmoil she faced in captivity. In an instant, the revered figure who had once inspired countless soldiers became a pawn in a larger game of power. It's easy to romanticize the image of Joan as the fierce warrior, but here she was, grappling with the harsh reality of her situation. How did someone who once commanded armies now confront the walls of a prison cell? The psychological toll was immense, transforming her from a symbol of hope into a captive who had to navigate a treacherous political landscape. This drastic change in circumstance was not just a personal defeat, it had broader implications. Joan's capture sent shockwaves through the ranks of her supporters. How would the people of France respond to the loss of their iconic leader? Would her absence weaken their resolve in the fight against English occupation? This situation was fraught with uncertainty, and it threatened to undermine the very momentum she had helped create. What followed was a series of events that would further complicate her already precarious situation. The Burgundians sold Joan to the English, who had their own agenda. They recognized her value not only as a prisoner, but also as a target for propaganda. The English sought to undermine the French spirit, and capturing Joan was a strategic move to demoralize her supporters. This raises a provocative question. What does it say about a society that fears a single woman so much much that they would go to great lengths to silence her. In captivity, Joan experienced an intense struggle for her identity. No longer the celebrated heroine, she was now viewed through the lens of her captors' narratives. The English set out to discredit her, framing her as a witch and a heretic. This was a deliberate attempt to reshape the story of Joan of Arc from one of valor to one of shame. Here's a controversial point to consider. Despite her divine claims, her ultimate downfall was not due to her lack of faith, but rather the political machinations of those around her. While her life hung in the balance, she had to decide how to respond to the questions and accusations thrown at her. Despite the dire circumstances, she remained defiant, asserting her faith and her divine mission. The trials she faced were not just physical, they were a test of her spirit and resolve. This period of captivity is marked by profound moments of introspection for Joan. As she reflected on her life's purpose and the path that had led her to this moment, the questions of loyalty, faith, and identity loomed large. What happens when everything you fought for seems to slip through your fingers? This struggle paints a poignant picture of her character, someone who, even when faced with the darkest of circumstances, refused to abandon her beliefs. Imagine the fear that gripped her during her time in captivity. Joan was not just afraid for her life, she was also terrified of what her capture would mean for the movement she had inspired. She had ignited a spark in the hearts of many, and now that fire was at risk of being extinguished, the betrayal she experienced from her allies compounded the tragedy of her capture. How could those she trusted turn against her? This betrayal was not just personal, it was emblematic of the fragile alliances in a time of war. Joan's story reflects a broader theme of how political maneuvering can undermine even the most noble causes. As we reflect on Joan's captivity, it's crucial to understand how this chapter of her life set the stage for the dramatic events to come. Her resilience would soon be tested in ways she could never have anticipated. The battle for her life was not just about survival, but about the legacy she would leave behind. This narrative of betrayal and captivity ultimately shapes how we remember Joan of Arc. The transformation from a victorious warrior to a prisoner of war raises essential questions about heroism, faith, and the harsh realities of politics. As we continue to explore her life, we must ask ourselves, what does it truly mean to be a leader in the face of overwhelming odds? The answers lie not just in Joan's story, but in the way we understand courage and resilience in our lives today. What was the trial really about? Joan of Arc's trial for heresy and witchcraft is one of the most notorious legal proceedings in history. Most people think that trials are meant to see justice, but the reality is that Joan's trial was less about justice and more about power. In a time when political dynamics were shifting and the outcome of the 100 Years' War was still uncertain, her trial became a tool for those in power to manipulate public opinion and control the narrative surrounding her remarkable life. Imagine being thrust into a courtroom where your very existence is at stake. For Joan, this trial was not just a legal battle, it was a fight for her life, a chance to assert her beliefs against a backdrop of accusations and hostility. From the very beginning, the atmosphere was charged with tension and political implications. Joan, who had once been celebrated as a heroine, now faced the full weight of skepticism from her captors and the church. The trial was set up in a way that left little room for her to defend herself, reflecting the larger struggle between the English and the French, as well as the church's desire to maintain control. Here's a strange fact. The trial proceedings were recorded in detail, which is why we have such a vivid account of what transpired. This is unusual for trials of that era, where documentation was often sparse. But this record serves as a double-edged sword. While it provides insights into Joan's words and actions, it also reveals the manipulation and biased nature of the proceedings. How can one be expected to receive a fair trial when the judges are more concerned with suppressing a potential symbol of resistance? A controversial point to consider is that the charges against Joan were not based solely on her actions on the battlefield, but rather on her claims of divine guidance. To the church officials, her visions and voices were not only heretical but also a direct challenge to their authority. What would happen to their power if people began to believe that a simple peasant girl could communicate with saints? This fear was palpable throughout the trial, and it shaped the narrative that was presented to the public. As Joan stood before her accusers, she faced a barrage of questions aimed not at uncovering the truth, but at discrediting her. You might wonder, how did she respond? Despite the pressure, Joan remained steadfast. She argued fiercely for her innocence and her faith, demonstrating remarkable courage under duress. However, the odds were stacked against her. The court had already made up its mind, and the outcome seemed predetermined. One of the most shocking moments of the trial was when Joan was asked to dress in women's clothing, a requirement that served both as a test of her loyalty and a means to humiliate her. The irony is striking. A woman who had boldly led men into battle was now being stripped of her autonomy and identity in a courtroom. This tactic aimed to undermine her strength and assert the traditional gender norms of the time, highlighting the complex interplay of gender, power, and perceptions. It illustrates the perilous intersection of faith, politics, and the law. Joan was not simply on trial for her actions. She was a symbol of defiance against a system that sought to control and suppress. Trial serves as a reminder of the lengths to which those in power will go to protect their interests, often at the expense of truth and justice. The proceedings dragged on, with Joan being subjected to intense psychological pressure. Imagine the relentless questioning designed to break her spirit. it. Yet she held her ground, often with wit and clarity that frustrated her interrogators. This raises an important question. How can someone maintain their conviction in the face of overwhelming opposition? Joan's resilience throughout this ordeal only adds to the complexity of her character. Ultimately, the trial culminated in a verdict that condemned Joan to death, branding her a heretic. This decision was not just a personal loss, it was a significant turning point in French history. The ramifications of her trial echoed far beyond the courtroom, affecting the morale of her supporters and altering the course of the war. People began to see her not just as a fallen hero, but as a martyr, which fueled the fires of nationalism and resistance against English occupation. Despite the tragic outcome, Joan's story did not end with her execution. Instead, her legacy grew, and the injustices she faced during the trial became central to her mythos. Years later, a retrial was held, where her name was cleared, and she was posthumously exonerated. This highlights a profound truth. History often remembers those who suffer for their beliefs and turns them into symbols of hope and resilience. As we reflect on Joan of Arc's trial, we must consider how this narrative resonates today. The fight against oppression, the struggle for justice, and the battle for one's beliefs remain relevant issues. Joan's life reminds us that even in the darkest moments, the spirit of defiance can inspire change and ignite a movement. What will you take away from this powerful chapter in her life? Joan's trial was more than just a legal battle. It was a clash of ideologies that ultimately shaped her legacy as a symbol of courage, faith, and resilience in the face of adversity. How did Joan end up in the hands of her enemies? Joan of Arc, once a celebrated heroine, found herself captured at Compiègne in 1430, a twist in her story that would change everything. Most people think that great leaders are invincible, but the reality is that even the most courageous can fall victim to betrayal and strategic miscalculation. Imagine the scene. Joan, who had led armies into battle, now finds herself on the other side, facing the very forces she once inspired. The moment of her capture was not just a result of direct confrontation, it was the culmination of a series of political maneuvers and alliances that betrayed her trust. What led to this pivotal moment? Joan had been fighting valiantly for the French cause, but the landscape of the war was shifting. Allies grew wary, and there was dissent among those who once supported her. This disillusionment was exacerbated by her increasing boldness, which some saw as a threat. Here's a strange fact. Joan was captured while leading an army, but her capture was largely facilitated by a lack of coordination with her own troops. This highlights a critical issue in military strategy: communication. In the chaos of battle, a single misstep can lead to devastating consequences. You might wonder, how did her allies allow this to happen? The answer lies in the complex web of political intrigue that characterized the 100 Years' War. Joan's extraordinary claims of divine guidance made her a polarizing figure. While many revered her, others felt threatened by her growing influence. Imagine the fear and uncertainty that enveloped her during those final moments before capture. In a desperate attempt to hold the line, Joan found herself isolated, outmaneuvered, and surrounded. She had always believed in her divine mission, but at that moment, reality set in. It's a profound irony that the very faith that had fueled her success would also be used against her. How can faith be both a shield and a sword? After her capture, the narrative shifted dramatically. Once hailed as a savior of France, Joan became a prisoner of war. The betrayal from her own allies weighed heavily on her. It's a powerful reminder that in the world of politics and war, loyalties can be fleeting. Imagine being in her shoes, from leading a charge to facing the looming threat of execution. This stark contrast emphasizes the fickle nature of fortune in the context of war. What happened next? Joan was taken prisoner by the Burgundians, who were allied with the English. This situation presented a unique opportunity for her enemies to exploit her capture. Rather than a simple military defeat, it became a propaganda tool. Now, Joan was no longer just a warrior. She was a symbol of hope for the French people, and her enemies understood the power of that symbolism. They aimed to tarnish her legacy and use her trial as a political weapon. During her captivity, Joan faced an intense psychological battle. Imagine the mental strain of being questioned and treated as a pawn in a larger game. Her captors sought to extract confessions that would discredit her and her claims of divine support. This created a sense of urgency for her. She had to prove her faith not just to her captors, but to the people who believed in her. It's a shocking twist. The very qualities that made her a powerful leader now placed her in grave danger. One controversial point to consider is that Joan's beliefs, particularly her claims of divine visions, were used to frame her as a heretic. The irony here is profound. What was once seen as a source of strength became a weapon against her. The notion that she was divinely chosen to lead was now painted as madness by her enemies. How does one reconcile unwavering faith with the accusations of heresy? This conflict between personal belief and public perception played a significant role in her downfall. As Joan sat in her cell, the weight of her circumstances must have been overwhelming. But even in captivity, she demonstrated remarkable resolve. Her spirit was not broken. How could someone facing such dire circumstances maintain their conviction? It's a lesson in resilience, showing that even when faced with betrayal and uncertainty, inner strength can shine through. Joan's capture and the events that followed set the stage for her trial. This period marked a dramatic shift from her identity as a warrior to that of a martyr in the making. It raises important questions about the nature of legacy. What does it mean to leave a mark on history? For Joan, he would become a symbol of courage and defiance, defiance against oppression, ultimately inspiring countless others even after her death. In reflecting on this pivotal moment in Joan's life, we see that her story is not just one of triumph but also of tragedy. Her capture signifies the fragility of power and the complex interplay of faith, politics, and personal conviction. Joan of Arc's legacy is not just about the battles she fought, but also about the unwavering spirit she embodied, even when the odds were stacked against her. This transformation from warrior to prisoner underscores the volatile nature of fame and power in times of war. As we delve deeper into Joan's story, consider the lessons that resonate even today. Her life serves as a poignant reminder of the struggles faced by those who dare to challenge the status quo, and the sacrifices made in the pursuit of a greater cause. After her death, Joan of Arc was remembered as a martyr, a figure whose story would inspire generations to come. But how did she become a symbol of hope in the hearts of many? Most people think of Joan simply as a warrior, but the reality is that her legacy transcended the battlefield, evolving into something much greater. Joan's martyrdom, which occurred in 1431 when she was burned at the stake, sparked an incredible transformation of her image. Initially condemned as a heretic by her captors, her death would eventually lead to a resurgence of her popularity and reverence among the French people. Joan's trial and execution were less about her actual deeds and more about the political climate of the time. The aftermath of her death revealed the power of narrative in shaping legacy. Imagine the impact of being branded a traitor and a witch while simultaneously being recognized as a national hero. This contradiction was the beginning of Joan's evolution into a symbol of French nationalism and Catholicism. In the years following her execution, people began to re-examine her story. They saw her not just as a figure of military might, but as a representation of faith, courage, and perseverance against oppression. It's fascinating to think about how perspectives can shift over time based on cultural and political needs. Joan's legacy was also fueled by the broader context of the 100 Years' War, which was marked by shifting loyalties and dramatic battles. After her death, France would eventually achieve victory, leading many to believe that her spirit had guided the French troops to success. This belief solidified her status as a martyr. The idea that she played a role in national identity became a source of inspiration for future generations. Why do you think stories like Joan's resonate so deeply within a culture? A strange fact to consider is that within 25 years of her death, the Catholic Church began to recognize the possibility of her sainthood. This rapid shift was driven by the growing desire for unity and strength among the French people, who were yearning for heroes in their history. Joan, the young peasant girl who had once led armies and claimed divine guidance, was being repositioned as a saint who would embody the virtues of the French people. Controversial yet powerful move, elevating her from a politically charged figure to a symbol of hope and faith. How did this transformation impact the collective memory of Joan? The narrative surrounding her evolved significantly, and she became a figure representing the fight against tyranny. In fact, her claims of divine inspiration were viewed in a new light. The complexities of her character began to emerge. She was seen not just as a warrior, but as a pious woman devoted to her faith. This evolution didn't just happen in a vacuum. It reflected the changing attitudes of the French people. Joan became a rallying cry for those fighting against oppression, and her image was used in literature and art to inspire others. Her legacy grew to encompass themes of resilience and faith, demonstrating that even in the face of dire consequences, one's convictions could lead to monumental change. Consider this: Joan of Arc's story highlights the transformative power of martyrdom. Her death not only solidified her place in history, but also served as a catalyst for movements that sought justice and righteousness. The shift from warrior to martyr created a space where she could be celebrated rather than condemned. This transformation raises an important question: how do we memorialize figures who challenge the status quo? As Joan's legacy grew, so did the movements surrounding her. By the time of her canonization in 1920, she was recognized not only as a saint but also as a feminist icon. Her defiance against the gender norms of her time and her rise to prominence challenged societal expectations. This aspect of her story resonates with modern discussions about women's rights and empowerment, showing that her influence extends far beyond her historical context. Through the lens of her martyrdom, Joan of Arc became a figure of resilience, embodying the struggle against oppression. Her life story serves as a reminder that the fight for justice is often fraught with challenges, yet through conviction and faith, it can inspire generations to rise up for what they believe in. In conclusion, Joan of Arc's martyrdom and legacy exemplify how powerful narratives can shape cultural identity. Her story transcends time, continuing to inspire movements and individuals alike. As we reflect on her life, we find that she is not just a historical figure. She is a beacon of hope, resilience, and strength for all who dare to challenge the norms and fight for their beliefs. What led to Joan of Arc's eventual canonization, and why did it take so long? Most people think that a martyr's path to sainthood is straightforward, but the reality is far more complex. Joan's journey to becoming a saint was filled with political intrigue, evolving perceptions, and a quest for justice that spanned centuries. Initially, after her execution in 1431, Joan was branded a heretic by the English and their allies, who saw her as a threat to their claim over France. Yet, the very elements that led to her condemnation would later fuel her rise to sainthood. Imagine the irony. A young woman who was once vilified would become a celebrated figure in the eyes of many. This transformation began just a few decades after her death, as the tides of war changed and the French sought heroes to wreck. In 1456, a retrial was conducted by the Catholic Church, largely influenced by the burgeoning French nationalism following their victory over the English. This retrial, which found Joan innocent of her original charges, was a significant turning point. It marked the beginning of her reclamation as a national heroine. People began to see her not as a mere warrior, but as a symbol of hope and resilience. It's fascinating to think that a significant part of her story was written in the courtroom rather than on the battlefield. A strange fact that many may not know is that during her retrial, evidence of her divine visions and her character were re-examined, and witnesses who had previously testified against her now spoke in her favor. The process was not just a legal procedure, it became a powerful narrative of redemption. This illustrates how the historical context and societal beliefs can dramatically shape a person's legacy. It raises an important question. How do collective memories of individuals evolve, and what role do politics play in that transformation? As the years passed, Joan's image shifted. She transformed from a controversial figure into a beloved saint. In 1909, Pope Pius X declared her venerable, and by 1920, she was canonized by Pope Benedict XV. This canonization was not merely a recognition of her martyrdom, it was also an acknowledgement of her profound impact on the French psyche. The Catholic Church decision to canonize Joan reflects broader themes of national identity and unity in the aftermath of war. Controversially, some argue that her canonization was driven more by nationalistic fervor than genuine faith. Critics contend that Joan's sainthood was politicized, serving as a unifying symbol for a fractured nation. However, this criticism only adds layers to her story. It highlights how complex motivations can intertwine in the realms of faith, history, and politics. Joan's canonization also sparked discussions about women's roles in the church and society. How could a young peasant girl from Domrémy rise to such heights? Her life challenges traditional gender norms and presents her as a powerful figure not just in history, but also in the context of women's rights. Joan's story has become a touchstone for those advocating for female empowerment and leadership. In her, many see a reflection of the struggles faced by women throughout history and in contemporary society. An intriguing aspect of Joan's legacy is the way her image has been embraced in popular culture, often depicted as a strong, courageous woman who defied societal expectations. From literature to film, Joan's character has inspired countless adaptations. This ongoing fascination with her life story demonstrates the timeless appeal of her journey. And what does this tell us about the stories we choose to tell and celebrate in our culture? Throughout her canonization process, there were also debates about the nature of her visions. Initially viewed skeptically, many began to regard them as genuine divine encounters. This shift illustrates the evolving understanding of spirituality and mysticism. In a way, Joan became a bridge between the mystical and the political, embodying both the struggles of faith and the complexities of governance. Ultimately, Joan of Arc's canonization serves as a testament to the power of narratives in shaping cultural identity. Her life story demonstrates that the path to sainthood is not merely about miracles or martyrdom. It involves the intricate interplay of personal conviction, societal change, and the relentless pursuit of justice. Today, she is celebrated not just as a saint but as an enduring symbol of hope and resilience for all who dare to challenge the status quo. In this exploration of Joan of Arc's journey to sainthood, we uncover the layers of complexity in her legacy. Her life is a reminder that even in the face of adversity, one can inspire a movement, change perceptions, and ultimately become a beacon of hope for generations to come. As we reflect on her journey, we can see that Joan of Arc is much more than a historical figure. She is an icon whose spirit continues to inspire and challenge us to this day. How did Joan influence French history in a way that still resonates today? Most people think of her primarily as a warrior, but the reality is that her impact goes much deeper, shaping the very fabric of French identity and the course of the nation. Joan of Arc is not just a historical figure. She embodies resilience and courage, setting a precedent for future generations. Let's start with the historical context. Joan's actions came during the 100 Years' War, a protracted conflict between England and France that lasted from 1337 to 1453. At that time, France was on the brink of collapse, both politically and militarily. The French crown was struggling to maintain its authority, while the English were gaining ground, having captured key territories, including Paris. Most historians agree that without Joan's intervention, France might have succumbed to English rule. Imagine the trajectory of history if the French had lost. How different would Europe look today? When Joan arrived on the scene, she was not just rallying troops. She was reigniting hope in a beleaguered nation. Her famous statement to the Dauphin Charles VII about her divine mission to drive the English out was a powerful call to arms. But here's a strange fact. She inspired not just the military but the general populace, who rallied around her as a symbol of hope. It's fascinating to think how a single person's vision can change a nation's morale. Joan's impact was most vividly illustrated in her role during the Siege of Orléans in 1429. Her strategic insights and remarkable leadership helped lift the siege, turning the tide of the war. What's often overlooked is the psychological effect her presence had on the soldiers. This was not just about physical battles. It was about belief and conviction. conviction. Joan transformed what had become a hopeless struggle into a rallying point for French nationalism. The people began to believe they could win. It's a little controversial, but some argue that Joan's influence extended beyond the battlefield into the political arena. After the siege, she played a crucial role in the coronation of Charles VII in Reims, which solidified his claim to the throne. The coronation was a symbolic act, representing a unified France under a legitimate king. This moment was more than a political maneuver. It marked the birth of a new national identity. Joan was at the center of this transformative moment, and her actions contributed to a renewed sense of French pride. Now here's a rare fact. The very coronation ceremony Joan helped facilitate was filled with rituals that underscored the divine right of kings. This connection between Joan's divine visions and Charles's kingship created a powerful narrative that would influence how monarchy was viewed in France for centuries. The image of a peasant girl directing the fate of a king not only empowered common folk, but also challenged the established order, paving the way for discussions about leadership and governance. As the war progressed, Joan's influence continued to shape French national identity. Her legacy went beyond her lifetime. She became a symbol of courage and resistance. When she was captured and executed, her martyrdom transformed her into a national icon. The French people began to see her as a symbol of the struggle for independence. It's interesting to note that her execution by the English led to a surge of support for the French cause, illustrating how adversity can sometimes fuel a movement even further. Joan's story is filled with lessons about the intersection of personal conviction and broader social movements. What does her story teach us about courage and resilience? It shows that individuals can have a profound impact on history, not just through actions in battle, but through inspiring others to believe in a cause greater than themselves. This has important implications today, as we continue to seek leaders who embody these qualities in our own social and political landscapes. The impact of Joan's legacy is evident even in modern France. She has been embraced as a national heroine, and her life story is taught in schools, celebrated in art, and commemorated in monuments. The very fabric of French culture is interwoven with her narrative. Joan's spirit can be seen in social movements that champion justice and equality, as she has become a model for those who fight against oppression. In essence, Joan of Arc is much more than a historical warrior. She is a beacon of hope for resilience and national pride. Her journey reminds us that anyone, regardless of their background, can inspire change and unite a nation. Today, as we reflect on her story, we can see the enduring influence she has had, not just in history, but in the hearts of those who continue to fight for their beliefs. This is why her legacy remains powerful and relevant, inspiring new generations to stand firm in their convictions. How has Joan of Arc inspired artists and writers throughout the century? Most people think of her merely as a historical warrior, but the reality is that her life and legacy have transcended time, becoming a source of creative inspiration for countless creators. From novels to paintings, her story has been interpreted in myriad ways, each adding depth to her already rich legacy. Joan of Arc's presence in literature began almost immediately after her death. One of the earliest accounts was written by a priest named Jean de Rouvray, who chronicled her life and martyrdom. What's fascinating is that this biography was published only a few years after her execution, highlighting the immediate impact she had on her contemporaries. This early portrayal set the stage for how her narrative would evolve, becoming both a historical account and a legendary tale. In literature, Joan's character has often been depicted as the embodiment of bravery and conviction. Writers like Mark Twain, who authored O Personal Recollections of Joan of Arc, presented her not only as a warrior, but as a young woman filled with doubts and fears, battling against the immense pressures of her destiny. Twain's portrayal adds a layer of complexity to her character that many people might not expect. It's controversial to think that such a revered figure could also have been vulnerable and human, which makes her story all the more relatable. A rare fact is that Joan has been depicted in over 100 films, including the classic 1928 silent film, The Passion of Joan of Arc, directed by Carl Theodor Dreyer. This film is renowned for its striking visuals and emotional depth, showcasing Joan's inner turmoil and strength. It's often regarded as one of the greatest films ever made, which speaks to the power of her story on screen. This cinematic interpretation has allowed audiences to engage with her life in a visceral way, making her experiences accessible to those who might not read about her in history books. Joan's influence extends to the realm of painting as well. Artists like Eugène Delacroix captured her spirit in iconic works such as À la liberté guidant le peuple, where the figure of Joan often embodies the struggle for freedom. Her image has become synonymous with French nationalism, not just as a warrior, but as a symbol of hope and perseverance. The emotional weight of these paintings evokes a powerful response, reminding viewers of the sacrifices made for liberty. In modern times, Joan's story continues to resonate in various artistic expressions. Musicals, operas, and even graphic novels have emerged, each offering new interpretations of her life and message. For example, the musical Joan of Arc, Into the Fire, explores her life through a contemporary lens, using modern music and themes to connect with today's audience. This evolution illustrates how her story remains relevant, adapting to the cultural contexts of different eras. Many people might not realize that Joan has also inspired feminist literature and discussions surrounding women's empowerment. Her defiance of societal norms and her role in a male-dominated society Captivity resonate strongly with modern audiences. Authors have drawn parallels between her struggle and the fight for women's rights today, illustrating that her legacy is not confined to history, but is a living, breathing part of the ongoing conversation about gender equality. Controversially, some interpretations of Joan's story challenge the traditional narrative, questioning the motives of those around her. Was she merely a pawn in a larger game of politics, or was she a genuine visionary? These questions have fueled debates in literary circles, adding layers to her character that keeps scholars and readers engaged. The complexity of her motivations and the circumstances surrounding her life provoke thought and discussion, making her a rich subject for exploration. As we consider Joan of Arc's enduring influence, it's clear that she is more than just a historical figure. She has become a symbol of resilience, hope, and the fight for justice. Her legacy continues to inspire not only artists and writers, but also individuals who seek to make a difference in their own lives. In every retelling of her story, there's an invitation to reflect on our own convictions and the courage it takes to stand up for what we believe in. Joan of Arc's journey from a peasant girl to a national heroine encapsulates the idea that anyone can change the course of history. Her presence in literature and art serves as a reminder that stories have the power to transcend time and inspire change. As we explore her life, we uncover not just the tale of a young woman, but the ongoing legacy of a symbol that resonates across generations. What do people often get wrong about Joan of Arc? Most view her solely as a warrior and a saint, but the reality is that her life and legacy are far more complex than that. Joan of Arc was a multifaceted individual whose story encompasses themes of faith, conviction, and the struggle against societal norms. Her life challenges many preconceptions about women in history, particularly regarding their roles and capabilities. One of the most surprising aspects of Joan's life is her background. While many see her as a fierce soldier, Joan began her journey in a small village, Domrémy, where she was a simple peasant girl. Imagine a young girl who, despite her humble beginnings, would go on to influence the course of a nation. This stark contrast between her origins and her destiny serves as a reminder that greatness can arise from the most unexpected places. A strange yet intriguing fact is that Joan was illiterate, a detail that might astonish many. How could someone who could not read or write lead armies and engage in political discourse? This lack of formal education makes her accomplishments even more remarkable. Joan's strength lay in her conviction and the divine visions she experienced, which she believed directed her actions. Her story emphasizes that knowledge and skills can come in many forms, and sometimes belief in oneself can be more powerful than traditional education. Controversially, Joan's military role has often overshadowed her spiritual journey. While she did lead troops into battle, it is essential to recognize that her mission was rooted in her faith. She believed she was chosen by God to support Charles VII and reclaim France from English domination. This divine mandate fueled her resolve and courage, making her not just a warrior but a spiritual figure as well. Tension between her martial prowess and her religious convictions creates a rich narrative that challenges the simplistic view of her as merely a warrior. Moreover, Joan's legacy is often viewed through a nationalistic lens, particularly in France. She is celebrated as a symbol of French unity and nationalism, embodying the spirit of the country during a time of turmoil. However, her legacy extends beyond borders and politics. Joan has also been adopted as a figure of resistance against oppression, inspiring countless movements throughout history. This broader interpretation of her impact is often overlooked, but is crucial to understanding her significance. Many misconceptions persist about Joan's death as well. Often portrayed as a tragic martyr, her execution was more politically motivated than purely punitive. The trial that led to her death was riddled with irregularities and influenced by the political climate of the time. This aspect of her story highlights the dangers of political machinations and the vulnerability of individuals who dare to challenge authority. It poses the question, how often do we see individuals today targeted for standing up against injustice? A rare fact that many may not know is that Joan's trial was conducted by a pro-English bishop, Pierre Cochon, who had a vested interest in her condemnation. This reveals how history can be shaped by those in power and how narratives can be constructed to serve specific agendas. Joan's story serves as a cautionary tale about the manipulation of truth for political gain and the importance of seeking justice. Additionally, Joan's influence as a historical figure has spurred numerous artistic interpretations. From literature to film, she has been represented in various forms, often highlighting her complexities and challenges. These portrayals allow contemporary audiences to engage with her story in a dynamic way, showcasing the ongoing relevance of her life and message. Artists and writers continue to explore her character, revealing the myriad ways her experiences resonate with modern themes of empowerment and resistance. It's also worth noting that Joan has been recognized as a feminist icon, challenging gender roles and expectations. In an era when women were largely excluded from positions of power, her rise to prominence is both inspirational and revolutionary. This perspective encourages a re-evaluation of how we view female figures in history and the barriers they overcame. Joan's life prompts us to ask, what does it mean to be a female leader, and how can her story inspire future generations? In summary, Joan of Arc's life is often simplified to fit narratives of heroism and martyrdom, but her story is far more intricate. It encompasses themes of faith, conviction, and the fight against societal norms. By exploring these complexities, we gain a deeper understanding of not only Joan herself, but also the historical context that shaped her life. Her journey serves as a powerful reminder that true strength comes from within, and that one person's conviction can indeed change the course of history. As we reflect on Joan's legacy, we can draw lessons about resilience, faith, and the importance of standing up for our beliefs, no matter the cost. Why is Joan considered a feminist icon today? It's intriguing to think that a figure from the 15th century could resonate with modern discussions about gender and empowerment. Most people view Joan of Arc primarily through the lens of her military achievements and her status as a martyr. However, the reality is that her life and legacy challenge societal norms in ways that are remarkably relevant even today. Joan defied the conventions of her time by stepping into roles that were traditionally reserved for men. Imagine a young woman in the Middle Ages who not only claimed to hear divine voices but also took command of an army in a male-dominated society. This act of defiance alone makes her an icon of empowerment. People often think of female leaders as a modern phenomenon, but Joan's story highlights the existence of strong women who challenged the status quo long before contemporary feminism took root. An unusual fact about Joan is that she often wore male clothing, which was a radical choice during her time. Many historians argue that this was not merely a practical decision, but a symbolic act of rebellion against the gender norms of the day. Joan's choice to don armor and male attire can be seen as a powerful statement about identity and agency, which resonates with today's discussions on gender fluidity and the breaking of traditional gender roles. This raises an important question. What does it mean to defy societal expectations, and how does that impact a person's legacy? Moreover, Joan's life invites us to explore the controversial notion that her martyrdom has been co-opted by various political and religious groups over the centuries. While she has been revered as a symbol of French nationalism and Catholicism, her story has also been utilized to promote various agendas that may not align with her original intentions. This manipulation of her image complicates the narrative around her and prompts us to consider how women's stories are often rewritten to serve specific cultural or political purposes. It's a reflection of the broader challenges women face when seeking to carve out their own identities and narratives in history. Interestingly, Joan's story has inspired countless women across different movements, serving as a touchstone for those advocating for equality and justice. From suffragettes in the early 20th century to modern feminist activists, Joan's courage serves as a beacon of hope. Her legacy reminds us that standing up against oppression can lead to profound change, a lesson that continues to inspire new generations of women. Yet, it's essential to ask, how can we ensure that her story remains authentic and not just a tool for others' agendas? In the realm of art and literature, Joan of Arc has been portrayed in numerous ways, each interpretation revealing different facets of her character. From the heroic to the tragic, these representations allow us to explore her complexities in depth. I've long been fascinated by the duality of her persona as both a fierce warrior and a devoted servant of God. This duality invites rich discussions about the roles of women in history, how they can embody strength while also embracing vulnerability. Despite being a historical figure who lived centuries ago, Joan's experiences and struggles resonate with modern women fighting for their rights and representation. Her story encourages a conversation about the intersection of gender, power, and identity. In many ways, Joan's life is a reminder that the fight for gender equality is not new. It has roots that go back hundreds of years, embodied in the lives of women like her. But what can we learn from Joan's journey as we navigate our own challenges in the present day? One aspect that's often overlooked is Joan's spirituality. While many view her primarily as a military leader, her deep faith and connection to the divine played a crucial role in her life and decisions. Joan's reliance on her visions not only fueled her ambition, but also provided her with the strength to face insurmountable odds. This brings us to the question of how faith and conviction can empower individuals in their pursuits, regardless of societal constraints. As we reflect on Joan's life and her status as a feminist icon, we can draw inspiration from her story. She reminds us that challenging the status quo is not only possible but necessary. Joan's legacy compels us to examine our own beliefs about gender roles and the narratives we accept as truth. Each of us has the potential to carve our own path, just as she did. By embracing her story, we acknowledge the countless women who have come before us, each fighting their own battles, each contributing to the ongoing struggle for equality. In conclusion, Joan of Arc's legacy as a feminist icon serves as a powerful testament to the resilience of women throughout history. Her defiance of gender norms, her spiritual conviction, and her enduring influence continue to inspire and challenge us today. As we honor her memory, let us remember that the fight for equality is an ongoing journey, and each of us has a role to play in shaping a more just and equitable future. Joan's story is not just a relic of the past. It is a call to action for all of us to stand up for our beliefs and strive for change in our own lives and communities. What can you learn from Joan's experiences? Many people often overlook the profound lessons her life offers, choosing instead to focus solely on her military exploits. Yet the reality is that Joan of Arc's journey Domrémy is rich with insights on courage, resilience, and the power of conviction. Reflect for a moment on her unwavering faith. Despite facing insurmountable challenges, Joan stood firm in her beliefs. This steadfastness not only propelled her to lead armies, but also inspired those around her to believe in a greater cause. Imagine being a young woman in a time when your voice was often silenced, yet you chose to speak up, to lead, and to fight for what you believed was right. It's a powerful reminder that conviction can ignite change, even in the most oppressive circumstances. Born to peasant farmers, her rise to prominence defied the expectations of her class. This raises an interesting point. How often do we limit ourselves based on our backgrounds? Joan's story teaches us that greatness is not reserved for the elite. It's accessible to anyone with the courage to pursue their dreams and stand for their beliefs. A strange fact about Joan is that she led her first military campaign at the tender age of 17. This was a time when most young women were expected to focus on domestic duties, yet she was leading troops into battle. It's astonishing to think about the level of responsibility and the courage it took to inspire soldiers twice her age. This defiance of gender norms makes her a timeless example of female empowerment. Yet, it also sparks controversy. Does her military leadership overshadow her spiritual calling? Or do both aspects make her story even more compelling? As we dive deeper into her lessons, we can't ignore the challenges she faced. After achieving significant victories, Joan encountered political intrigue and betrayal, particularly after the coronation of Charles VII. Here lies a critical lesson. Success can often attract criticism and skepticism, especially from those who feel threatened by change. Joan's experience reminds us that resilience in the face of adversity is crucial. When she was met with doubts from those she fought to elevate, she did not waver in her conviction. Instead, she continued to push forward. This aspect of her journey teaches us the importance of staying true to our convictions, even when faced with opposition. Joan's courage was not just about physical bravery on the battlefield. It was also about emotional strength. She endured immense psychological pressure during her trials and faced death with remarkable poise. Her unwavering spirit in such dire circumstances challenges us to consider our own reactions to fear and uncertainty. What if we faced our fears with the same resolve Joan exhibited? How might that change our lives? Additionally, Joan's life encourages us to embrace our unique voices and perspectives. At a time when women were often sidelined, she carved her path, serving as an enduring symbol of what it means to be unapologetically oneself. In today's context, this lesson is invaluable. How often do we silence our voices for fear of judgment or rejection? Joan's story compels us to speak up, to advocate for ourselves and others, and to remain resilient in the face of adversity. There's a rare insight to be gained from her story regarding the intersection of faith and action. Joan believed deeply in her divine purpose, and that faith fueled her actions. It prompts us to reflect on our own beliefs. How do they shape our actions? Joan's life encourages us to align our beliefs with our behaviors, leading us to pursue our passions and advocate for our values. As we draw lessons from Joan's life, it's crucial to recognize the enduring influence of her story. Her courage in challenging gender norms has inspired generations of women to stand up for their rights and pursue leadership roles. Whether through literature, art, or modern feminist movements, Joan remains a powerful symbol of strength and resilience. Her legacy teaches us that even in the face of overwhelming odds, we can rise to greatness by being true to ourselves and fighting for what we believe in. In conclusion, the life of Joan of Arc offers profound lessons on courage, resilience, and conviction. Her journey from a humble peasant girl to a national heroine is a testament to the power of believing in oneself. By reflecting on her experiences, we can draw inspiration for our own lives, learning to embrace our voices, stand firm in our beliefs, and face challenges with unwavering strength. Joan's legacy lives on, encouraging us all to be fearless in our pursuits and to remember that we too have the power to shape our destinies. Why is Joan considered a feminist icon today? Many might not immediately think of her as a figure of feminism, but the reality is that Joan of Arc defied the societal norms of her time in ways that resonate with contemporary discussions about women's rights and empowerment. She is a powerful reminder of the strength and resilience that women can embody, especially in patriarchal societies. Most people think of Joan primarily as a warrior or a saint, but she was so much more than that. She challenged the very foundations of gender expectations in the 15th century. Imagine a young peasant girl stepping into the limelight, dressed in armor and leading men into battle. This was almost unthinkable in her era. Her boldness in taking on traditionally male roles can make us reconsider what it means to break barriers. A strange yet fascinating fact about Joan is that she had no formal military training. Despite this, she successfully led troops and played a crucial role in pivotal battles. This fact alone is incredibly inspiring. How many of us hold back from pursuing our passions simply because we don't have formal training? Joan shows us that determination and belief in oneself can often triumph over conventional qualifications. However, it's not just about her bravery on the battlefield. Joan's story empowers women to embrace their strength in various contexts. At a time when women were expected to be obedient and passive, she took control of her own destiny. Her story is controversial. Some argue that her military exploits overshadow her spiritual calling. But can we truly separate the two? Her faith and conviction fueled her actions, highlighting the complex interplay between spirituality and empowerment. Joan's defiance of gender roles doesn't stop at her actions. She articulated her vision with clarity and confidence, compelling influential men, including Charles VII, to listen to her. This aspect of her story teaches us that speaking out and asserting one's beliefs is crucial. What would the world look like if more women felt empowered to voice their opinions and lead? Her legacy as a feminist icon has evolved over the centuries, particularly in the context of modern feminism. Joan's life story resonates with many contemporary movements advocating for women's rights. She inspires countless women to challenge norms, whether in the workplace, politics, or personal lives. This leads us to a crucial question: how can we apply the lessons from her life to our own circumstances today? Joan serves as a powerful example for young women, encouraging them to pursue their ambitions without fear of societal judgment. Her journey illustrates that being a leader is not solely about holding power, but about inspiring others to believe in their potential. By taking ownership of her narrative, Joan challenges each of us to do the same in our lives. It's worth noting that Joan's influence is not just confined to feminist discourse. Her story has found a place in various forms of art and literature, where she continues to be celebrated as a symbol of strength and independence. In countless depictions, she embodies the idea that one can be both a warrior and a compassionate figure, fighting for justice and equality. Joan's complexity as a character is what makes her story so compelling. She wasn't just a warrior or a martyr. She was a young woman navigating the challenges of her time with a fierce spirit. This multifaceted portrayal is crucial in today's discussions about women's roles in society. It encourages us to appreciate the diversity of women's experiences and the various ways they can embody strength. Finally, Joan of Arc's legacy encourages all of us to reflect on our definitions of leadership and strength. In a world that still grapples with gender inequality, her story inspires us to advocate for ourselves and others. It reminds us that true empowerment often comes from embracing our unique identities and challenging the status quo. As we carry her legacy forward, let us remember that the spirit of Joan of Arc lives on in every person who dares to stand up for what they believe in, regardless of the obstacles in their way. Conclusion: Joan of Arc's life and legacy continue to resonate as a powerful symbol of feminism and empowerment. Her journey challenges us to embrace our strength, advocate for our beliefs, and break down barriers. As we learn from her story, we can become champions for our causes and inspire future generations to do the same. The lessons we draw from Joan's life are not just historical. They are relevant today and will continue to inspire those who dare to dream and fight for their convictions. If you enjoyed this epic journey, please subscribe to our channel for more thrilling historical tales. Don't miss out on new videos. Hit the notification bell to stay updated.